Jonathan Mingo could miss up to 6 weeks with a knee injury. We'll tell you what that means for the rest of the Cowboys wide receivers next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're going to continue to break down all of the action from the Cowboys' second preseason game against the Ravens. But Landon, let's start with this. Jonathan Mingo, the Cowboys' number 3, number 4, number 5 receiver. I don't know, wherever you want to put him. One of their key contributors on offense is going to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a PCL injury. Was doing some research before the show. That's generally a 6-week injury. And that means he's likely going to miss multiple regular season games. What does this do to Jonathan Mingo, and what does it do for the rest of the receivers on the roster?
Well, for Mingo, it, kind of delays his sort of coming out debut of in a Cowboys uniform. I mean, he's obviously been in the Cowboys uniform for the last year, but he hasn't really had much opportunity. He certainly didn't have much last year. I think he had, obviously his targets, but not a lot with Dak Prescott, if any.
None with Dak.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, this is really his year to kind of finally be a contributor to the offense in some form or fashion, and that's going to be delayed, right? So I think the high likelihood is that he will. And remember, we're going to have to start reminding ourselves these roster rules, right? He's going to have to be on the initial 53-man roster in order for them to put him on IR on the other side of it. And then hopefully you can put him on the return to IR, which means he would be back, I think, 4 weeks is what it is the minimum.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
So that's where he's probably headed. I can't imagine that they're going to do like hold him and then try to wait it out.
I do want to point out Todd Archer from ESPN was clarifying this today. He said teams are allowed to have 2 players as injured reserve designated to return on final cuts on August 26th. Without that designation, they must be on the roster. So it does sound like they can put them on. Right. Yeah, it's only 2, so you could put them on injured reserve and then potentially get him back without having to do that roster song and dance. But they've got some other guys that are going to be in that conversation, whether that's Kalen Carson. I don't think Tyler Guyton's going to be on it, but we can talk about him. Savon Ravel, Trayvon Diggs are 2 guys that are on lists right now, but you might want to bring them back so you can get them sooner. They just have a lot of injuries going on. It's kind of the point right now.
Yeah, let's talk about Guyton here in a second because there's obviously more there as well. But yes, I agree. It is going to be kind of an interesting question how they handle this. I would imagine that with Diggs, if they decide that he's not close to being ready, that they'll just keep him on PUP, right? And yes. So that he don't have to use an IR spot there. I think the other guys that are either close are probably going to get either season IR'd or in the case of Ravel, they'll probably try to just bring him on the roster, right? And then and see if they can carry him over that point.
NFI, I believe. All these guys are on so many different lists.
Yeah, so he's on a different list. He's on NFI because he was, his situation came from college, right?
Correct.
So he qualifies for that. So he can obviously be on his own list. The only other guy that I think that kind of you're worried about is Butler, who's coming off of his ACL injury. I'm not sure if he ended up on PUP or not. So all these, the point is that there's a lot of these guys to kind of keep track of, and there's only 2 of those spots, as you just told us, that allow you to kind of slip through without having to waste a roster spot, for week 1. So hopefully there isn't another situation that's going to fit the bill there.
I'm just bummed for Mingo because he played before he got hurt. He made an unbelievable play down the sideline. We were excited about, him playing with Dak and being one of these big bodied outside receivers. And now we're going to have to wait. And, let's say it's a 6-week injury. And I think Todd Archer was even saying that Cowboys are bracing for it to maybe be even a little bit longer than that. You put him on the IR list. He misses the first month of the season. And then it's really hard to get back on like a moving train as the season is going on. You have all these other guys you're working into the offense. It's just a bummer for a guy that kind of needed to get off to a good start.
Yeah, I will say this. I think when he comes back, they're going to fold him right back into the offense. And who knows, with injuries and the way they are, maybe he comes back right in time when you need him for somebody else that get Tolbert or someone who gets nicked up or something. So there is that hope. But it does obviously open up a lot of opportunity for some of these down roster guys. They're going to have a lot of choices.
Well, and let's start with Jalen Tolbert, because I think there was a healthy competition between Tolbert and Mingo as to who would be that other receiver outside of CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Kevontae Turpin. I think those guys were very close. Now it feels like, at least to me, that Tolbert's going to be that guy, and that's your top four. And then everything else beyond that is open, whether that's Ryan Flournoy, Jalen Brooks, maybe someone like Trayshawn Holden ends up getting a spot on the roster. Or maybe they only keep 5 receivers, Landon, and they go deeper on defense, when they've got, or maybe they go deeper on the offensive line. I'm open to anything now.
Yeah, we're definitely going to dive into this heavily in the third segment, but I think that the thing is that I wouldn't just automatically assume that this means that they're going to keep the same number of wide receivers now. I think with Mingo, it's interesting because it was Tolbert's job, and Mingo kind of has elbowed his way into having Tolbert share the job, right? And that's what it feels like. The role that Mingo was going to be filling was kind of a role that he would have been splitting with Tolbert. So I think now it's just natural that Tolbert just takes back over that role of the kind of third, utility wide receiver who can kind of play anywhere.
Probably who it should be anyways, because he can fill all 3 spots. He's fairly reliable. But I think, honestly, this probably just means more of Kevontae Turpin. Assuming, and again, this is something we haven't talked about in a while, assuming that Kevontae Turpin isn't suspended. Like, the NFL is still investigating all that kind of stuff. We haven't heard anything, but it wouldn't shock us if Kevontae serves a 1 or 2 game suspension to start the year.
It wouldn't shock me also if he served a 1 to 2 game suspension in 2026. Like the way that these things have been going, it's been very slow going. So I wouldn't be shocked if it was a waiting game.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens at wide receiver, but I'm with you, Landon. Like, don't just assume that they're still going to keep 6 receivers, because there's a lot of spots, on defense, looking at that secondary, looking at the defensive tackle spot where you might need that extra roster spot to go a little bit long. And then once Mingo comes back, maybe you release somebody, or you start to shave down some of those numbers. But it's going to be interesting to see how they handle cutdowns.
Let's talk about one more guy real quick before we end this segment. Tyler Guyton, we got a little bit of news coming back. It sounds like he's ahead of schedule on his recovery, that he's beating landmarks, where I think the phrasing that they use. So maybe some positive news there. I don't know what that means for necessarily week 1, but if there was any hope for week 1, him coming out and playing, it continues. We'll see if he actually gets on the field here maybe next week.
My guess is that they're going to hold him out for week 1. Not that way he's not rushed. Then they give him 10 days to get ready for a home game against the Giants. Now that's going to be tough, coming right back onto the field and going up against all those pass rushers. But there doesn't seem like there's any sense to rush him when you want him to be healthy for the entire season, not just week 1.
Yeah, and I think Nate Thomas has played well, from what we've seen. At least gives you some confidence that with a whole bunch of help, you can get through the football game.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the other tackle spot and talk about a rookie that's really impressed in the preseason, who we really haven't mentioned at all. We'll talk about Ajani Cornelius next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race. Listen, Joe Burrow, just based on what I saw on Monday night, he's going to have to throw for like 6,000 yards to keep the Bengals competitive. That's not a bad pick. Or maybe you see a sleeper in the AFC you think is going to make it to the Super Bowl, or you just want to parlay your division dark horse winners. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Landon, I want to talk about the offensive line a little bit. So we both got to watch some of the tape over the last couple days. Tyler Booker was really good. He was fun. Nate Thomas was a little bit up and down. I thought Mike Green got him a couple times, but overall not too bad. But one of the players that really stood out to me was Ajani Cornelius, the Cowboys' sixth round pick from Oregon. He has not allowed a pressure through 2 games on 38 pass blocking snaps. Not saying he should be a starter or anything like that, but I'm starting to get ideas about his long-term future in Dallas.
Well, it's funny because, again, another position where it's easy to kind of get lost in the wash, right? Because the Cowboys just have a whole bunch of bodies here, including several other veteran guys that have come back from either retirement or long time off, right? So they just have a whole lot of guys who have a lot of experience in the position. So a guy like Cornelius, who they liked coming out of the draft, he's working with the 3s and the 4s, or whatever that you call the post 3 group that kind of gets trickled in with whatever players are left on the bench. I think that what we need to see more of is him kind of working at elevated levels, right? Like, obviously Terrence Steele is not going to be playing any snaps in this preseason. Maybe you go out and put him out there with the ones, Cornelius out with the ones.
Like, I would like to see him play every snap this week against Atlanta. Every single snap.
I mean, I think you have an idea what you have in Akeem Adeniji. Like, I think it's fine. Like, it certainly isn't, noteworthy. Certainly having a guy like Cornelius perform as well as he has, even against the 3s and the 2s and 3s or whatever he's operating, has been very impressive. It certainly is worth more exploring than kind of seeing what you've got in this guy that, is kind of a known quantity with Akeem Adeniji. You may have found a guy that you could be looking at in a competition next year for the starting spot, with the kind of talent you've seen so far. So he's kind of proven that he can do it at the level that he's shown us at the kind of bottom of the bench. Let's take him up a ring or two and see if he still has the same level of success.
I just want to compare him to like other day 3 picks, and because when we saw like Matt Waletzko and Josh Ball playing tackle, like their rookie years or their second years, I mean, those guys were really struggling, even against, the same competition, right? Those guys would get out there and they were just a disaster. And you were always hoping that they would figure it out because they were athletic. But someone like Cornelius, who's played, however many snaps, it was like 3,000 snaps in college, and he has all these pass blocking reps. It reminds me of Steele coming out of Texas Tech, where Steele had 4,000 career snaps. He was used to playing in an NFL offense, and that's kind of what you're seeing with Cornelius here. And you do wonder, let me ask you this: do you think he's going to make the 53-man roster?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I literally, before we started the show, kind of pulled out, dusted off the old spreadsheet for the template for our 53-man roster, really, because it's that time of year. And I just did it down and dirty, like, who is our, definite made the team core 40, guys. And I came up with 42 names, basically. And Cornelius was on it. And I think it's because, again, like, it's the talent that you see at the price, right? Like, he's a 6th round pick. You control the price really well. If he is a good player, even if he's just a ring below Adeniji, he's so much cheaper and he's younger, going to get better. It's one of those tie goes to the runner kind of situations. Like, you definitely are just going to give it to him. So I definitely think he's on the roster, simply because you see a little bit of upside with the talent. He costs you nothing. So you want to continue to cultivate an opportunity to have an extremely cheap potential starter if things go well, maybe a year from now.
I think he's on the team. He's somebody that I'm really excited about. I wanted to ask you about one other player on offense before we start to get to some of the other stuff. Luke Schoonmaker. We're going into year 3 of Luke Schoonmaker. He played a handful of snaps against Baltimore. We really haven't seen him do too much in the preseason. I know one of the things that we were kind of discussing going into training camp is, hey, is Brevin Spann-Ford going to beat him out? Well, Brevin Spanford's been dealing with an injury. He hasn't practiced. Have you seen anything at all from Luke Schoonmaker that suggests he's ready to have kind of a breakout season in year 3?
I don't think, I mean, breakout season is probably a tough
That's
thing
it. But like take the next step as a player. I guess that's a better way to put it.
I mean, I do think he's continuing to get play better and better football. I think that the problem that you're going to have with Schoonmaker in kind of clearing bars or anything that's tangible is that, you know, he's the tight end too. He's clearly the tight end too. I don't think that that's going to change. And now you've added in, you know, another kind of big time target hog in Pickens, right? So it's like there's less to go around. They're going to want to throw the football to the running back a lot. So I don't know how many passes he's going to necessarily catch, but I do think he's going to continue to be an extremely useful, valuable, versatile player. And I do think that that's what you saw a lot of last year. Look, last year was a lost season, you know, and in a lot of ways, like it was about trying to just see individual performances and who could, you know, improve. And I do think that in the absence of Jake Ferguson, we saw Schoonmaker, you know, step up and play, function as tight end 1, you know, and at a certain point. So I think as far as a guy that is going to be a reliable, solid part of your offense when he's out there, and if Fergie gets hurt, he can function as a tight end 1 for a game or two. I think Schooney can do that. I think the question is, like, was that necessarily worth a second round pick? I don't know. You know, I think at this point, like, we weren't sure at the time how you were going to end up feeling about Ferguson. And so it worked out because you like Ferguson and clearly they re-signed him. But I think, you know, there certainly are questions to be had, especially if Brevin Spanford is close to as good as Schooney is when he comes back from injury, whether that was ultimately worth a second round pick. I don't know. I just know that I think now that he's here, I'm glad Luke Schoonmaker's on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ferguson extension kind of told you what they think of Schoonmaker, where they like him as a backup, but not somebody that they think can be a high-end starter. Obviously, they think Jake Ferguson can. That's why they're paying him that much money. I think the Brevin Spanford injury helps Schoonmaker a lot, like solidify his spot on the depth chart. I am interested to see what happens with John Stevens. We know this team really likes John Stevens. We know London Wells likes him a lot. Could they justify keeping 4 tight ends? I have my doubts, but I did think he looked pretty good against the Ravens.
He also had a lot of pretty high profile drops, you know, at certain points. You know, he didn't quite have the camp that he had his rookie year.
No,
and maybe that was just more you know, the shock and surprise of him showing up at all. I don't know. Like the more you look at this roster and the more they already kind of have some niche players, you wonder if you can afford to hold on to a guy like Stevens on the roster.
All right, let's talk about some more tough roster decisions the Cowboys are going to have to make in the next couple of weeks. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ball field with your friends or your family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you have to be in the stands. That is exactly where GameTime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all of the stress. With the money that you save on the tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. And GameTime makes it all possible. GameTime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I love that you can see exactly what your seats are going to look like in the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's talk about some tough roster decisions the Cowboys are going to have to make over the next week and a half. Again, you were starting to put together your initial 53-man roster. I want to just run through a couple players, and you kind of tell me how you're feeling about their job right now. I want to start with Phil Mafah. Do you think he's somebody that ultimately ends up making the team?
I don't know. That's a tough one because like I felt like we were going to see more of him in this game, against the Ravens. But I think Miles Sanders ended up playing, and that just kind of pushed everybody down a little bit. And I thought that Mafah played well when he got opportunity, but we just didn't see a ton of him. I feel like if Mafah is gonna be on this team, like actually make the 53, we need to see a little bit more of him in this third preseason game. I'm hoping that him and Jaden Blue just kind of take it the entire game, to be honest. So
Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple more. Lyle Collins.
man, that's like it. You start sketching these positions out, and you just start running out of names. I imagine that Lale Collins is going to be someone that they're going to take advantage of not in a negative way, but as a guy like, hey, if we cut you, how about you come right back and sign with us on the other side of it? I imagine they're going to take advantage of the fact that he's a vested vet, and use him as someone that likely doesn't make the initial 53, and then maybe signs as a practice squad vet that can like come up and be used as needed.
I tend to agree. I'm going to give you a tricky one. Awesome Richards. He has not performed particularly well in preseason. I think he makes it, but I don't feel 100% confident in it.
I feel pretty confident that he will make it because they, specifically were using him a lot in like these 6 offensive line packages all throughout camp. So I do think that that's part of like a role that they've carved out for him. I probably say that they were taken a little bit by surprise by how he performed. I think mostly at guard is where he had the most problems, but he wasn't great at tackle either, especially compared to where he was last year. But I bet he still makes it.
I bet he makes it as well. But again,
cheap,
yeah,
cheap.
Yeah, it's true. Brian Schottenheimer promised that there was going to be some surprises on this roster.
That's true.
Maybe that's one of them. Let's go through a couple more. James Houston.
Man, that's the toughest one, I think. I did the list, right? And I'm looking at it right now, and obviously the top 5 are very clean. Like it's like that you're gonna have both of your former second round picks on here. Fowler, they just paid a lot of money. He had a good camp, and honestly, they've been like quietly kind of shielding him at this point and not letting him practice. So he's clearly, I think, your defensive end too. Parsons is Micah Parsons, and Ezaraku is obviously a guy that they have a lot of high hopes for. So if they're going to keep a 6 defensive end, there's still another 2 or 3 guys that are like all kind of including Peyton Turner, who they paid money for. So I just think, and Tyrus Wheat, who had, a good camp and I think he's a key special teams player. So I think that likely they find a way to hold on to him because he's just probably been a little bit too good and he's a veteran, so he does have some experience, and maybe teams will start to notice that maybe they made a mistake by letting him slip through. But man, I wouldn't be shocked if he got cut either, because there's just not a lot of room at the end right now.
No, and we should mention that even someone like Ernest Brown, we had Brian Schottenheimer go out of his way to compliment how he played in this game. And another one, and there's a longtime listener, Gorn, he mentioned Tyrus Wheat is somebody that the last 2 coaching staffs really liked. He's been kind of on and off the roster. He plays on special teams, and he's flashed a couple different times in the preseason. Now, I'm not putting him on my initial 53-man roster, but would I be shocked if he's like someone that gets activated and plays early in the season? I wouldn't be.
No, I would. In fact, I would say this. Unless he gets nabbed by somebody, I would be shocked if Tyrus Wheat wasn't on the week 1 game day roster, because he's like one of those. He's Kyle Wilbur, right? Like he's one of those guys. He plays great on special teams. He can play a couple different spots for you. If he can play defensive end, he can play linebacker if you need him to, I think. I think he probably ends up making the roster in some form or fashion, practice squad or something.
Last one I wanted to bring up to you. Zion Childress, the Cowboys slot corner / safety. That sounds like an easy one, right? Because he's been playing in the slot, but you start to go through the numbers, right? Like if you're going at safeties, you have your two starters, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson. You have your two backups, Wanye Thomas and Marquise Bell. And then you have Izzy Makamu. That's 5. You go to corners, same thing. Deron Bland, Kyrie Elam. You've got Keemon Hall, who you like. They're going to probably keep Andrew Booth. Do you think he ultimately makes it?
It's funny, the 42 I mentioned, I only put down 3 cornerbacks, and one of them is Mukwamo, because I was just like, because Diggs is could be on some list. I have no idea. And I don't know if Revel's going to be on some list. Half these guys, are going to be on the roster, are going to be with the Cowboys, but you don't know where they're going to end up.
Well, Kalen Carson. Is Kalen Carson going to be somebody that they keep on the roster because they think he can be ready by week 2?
Well, and let's even go back to your original problem here. Is clearly the Cowboys would prefer to kind of cobble together this nickelback situation until somebody kind of sticks out to the point where they can't ignore him and they have to play him there, or until they get all their cornerbacks back and Bland is your nickel corner, right? I think right now that may be very difficult to do, because how can you afford to go 3 deep at just nickelback? I don't think Childress can play a little bit of safety, I guess, if you need him to in a pinch. But Keemon Hall's not really an outside guy.
Nope.
And Mukwamu's Mukwamu is on the team because he can do anything, but he's not necessarily good enough to keep on the team by himself. I mean, to keep in the spot by himself. You want to cobble it together with these other guys, but can you afford the roster spots to do something like that?
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Check us out on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. He is Landon McCool. I am Marcus Mosher. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.